Okay.
All right, so we're all good, Larry?
Yep.
All right, so I will officially call the meeting to order and start with checks over $25,000, of which there was one. It went to AAA Emergency Supply for replacement of the 30 Scott Air Packs and cylinders for the packs. That was out of the capital fund, and it was $266,347. Secondly, we'd also like to schedule a public hearing to consider a local law amending Chapter 148 nuisances with respect to smoking. And that's for Monday, October 4th, 2001 at 7 p.m. I think we've spoken about this before, and I think we've kind of pared it back quite a bit and really have added vaping and cannabis to the smoking law, which they were not in there before. But that will be on the 4th. If I can have I'll make a motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So we have a public hearing. One other announcement I had was that the Energy Smart Homes kickoff meeting is Wednesday at 7 p.m. That's this Wednesday, the 22nd. So if you're interested in learning more about Energy Smart Homes, I believe there's more information, Larry, on our website, but I believe it's at the Warner Library in person and also on, I believe it's Zoom, but I probably shouldn't say it's Zoom. It could be a different dial-in, but it's this Wednesday either way. And moving on to correspondence, we actually had two pieces of correspondence related to Marvera's development near Halsey's Pond. One was from Stephen Hardy and one was from Chet Kerr. Chet Kerr reached out and asked if he could discuss it in the public comment section, which if he's on now, we'll have him do that when we get to the public comment section. Otherwise, we can always do it at the second public comment if he wasn't able to get on yet. But it, again, my policy in 2021 is to not read every letter, but to kind of give a brief summary of what they're about. Then the next one from Lillian Romano is about Villa Lawaro. There's also one from Chet Kerr about Villa Lawaro, so we'll discuss those during the public hearing. Chet Kerr also sent a letter about on behalf of APOA about the missing welcome signs in the southern part of the village coming from Dobbs Ferry. Larry says they're on the list. They just haven't been a priority. It always seems something comes up and they haven't been ordered, but I can assure them that they are on the list. The last one was from Darius Shafazada from Harris Beach on behalf of, I guess, the Dearman Close Homeowners Association about the Stearns Ridge dedication from the village. They had come into the last meeting and asked us if we would consider their road, dedicating their road to the village. This letter basically said they were surprised that, they were disappointed that we had rejected the application. I actually checked the tape. We hadn't rejected the application. We actually asked the attorneys to come back with more information about what had been promised to them in the past. And to my knowledge, we had not received that yet. So we haven't officially rejected anything in spite of what the letter says, at least per my recollection. And that's what we have for correspondence. So I guess we'll move on to public comment. I don't know if Chet Kerr is on yet, Larry. So I know he wanted to speak. And obviously anyone else who wanted to speak about anything not on the agenda tonight can feel free to raise their hand as well. And Chet Kerr is here. I see his hand raised. So that's good news.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
We can. How are you, Chet?
Good. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak briefly
Absolutely.
about.
And thank you for thank you for all your correspondence.
Sorry,
Thoughtful correspondence.
I apologize. I did not mean to.
No, not at all. They're three different issues, so we appreciate it.
But I wanted to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight about the issues I raised in my September 13th letter concerning the application for Marvera Corp. For limited site development approval of the undeveloped parcel adjacent to and just north of Halsey Pond. I'm not going to read my entire letter. I think it speaks for itself, but I wanted to highlight a couple of issues for the board's consideration. As this board is aware, Halsey Pond Park is one of Irvington's gems, a unique place in our village, used by many to find a peaceful place and enjoy the quiet beauty of nature and the pond. And if Marvera's development of this parcel is allowed to proceed as proposed, it could unfortunately dramatically change the experience of visiting Halsey Pond. This could have not only a direct impact on this parcel and the immediate neighboring parcels, but to the broader village, to everybody who visits the pond. And as I indicated in my letter, we're going to be writing to the planning board and asking it to take certain steps to mitigate this impact under its authority in evaluating the limited site development approval. And we have confidence in the planning board. It works hard and it takes its job very seriously. We believe, however, that the Board of Trustees has and should take a role in this process, given the potential impact of this proposed development on the residents of the village and the great number of users of the park. The basic problem presented here, as proposed by Marvera, is they would create 3 new lots immediately adjacent to the park. 2 of those lots, proposed lots 1 and 2, would have a building envelope within about 45 feet of the walkway around the northern side of the pond, and within 25 feet of the pathway that leads into the park from Palliser Road. You can see this on Exhibit 2 to our letter. Moreover, the actual 5,000 square foot footprint for building area that they have proposed on lot number 1 extends to within 25 feet, less than 10 yards from the village pathway into the park, and the proposed driveway to this house is within 15 feet of the pathway. You can see that on Exhibit 3 to my letter. No other existing house or structure is as close to the pond or walkway or intrudes so directly on the experience you have walking around Halsey Pond. If this proceeds as planned, what will be lost is the buffer that surrounds this unique park in the center of our community. What could also be lost is the experience of walking around Halsey Pond and feeling the quiet solitude that it offers park users today. So what are we asking the board to do? First, we're asking the board to take immediate steps to preserve and protect Halsey Pond Park by considering to purchase or obtain a conservation easement over all or part of the undeveloped parcel that is proposed for development. It would not have to be the entire parcel, but we are specifically focused on the southern boundary of the parcel, which is just north of the pathway, and the eastern boundary of the parcel, which is adjacent to the walkway into the park from Palliser Road. Second, we asked the Board of Trustees to make clear to the planning board the concern about the development of this parcel and the potential impact on Halsey Pond Park, and to suggest to the planning board that takes specific actions as part of its review of the application for limited site development approval. We very much respect the different roles that the planning board and the Board of Trustees have in this process. And as I said, we're confident the planning board takes its job very seriously. The planning board, however, needs to hear from the Board of Trustees that the proposed development of this parcel not only impacts this specific parcel and the owner, but also impacts everyone in our village who uses Halsey Pond Park. We asked the board to suggest the planning board take 3 minimum steps as part of its process. 1, increase the size of the setbacks along the southern boundary of the parcel and along the eastern boundary of the parcel. 2, require the developer to prepare a detailed updated stormwater and hydrogeological study to determine whether the development of this parcel could inadvertently impact and undermine the integrity of Halsey Pond and its watershed. Halsey Pond is protected wetland of the village, and it's a starting point for the tributary leading into Barney Brook. This parcel that they want to develop is uphill and immediately adjacent to the park and the pond, and extends closer than the 100 feet to the actual wetland covered by our wetlands law. The runoff of water and effluents into the pond was an area of focused concern in the 2003 comprehensive plan for the village. And as the board knows, the pond has previously been heavily damaged by runoff and pollution, which caused fish kills in the pond and was expensive to repair. And finally, in 3, we would ask that the developer require the developer to develop and incorporate a planting and landscape buffer that will preserve the scenic vistas of the adjacent Halsey Pond Park. So that's all I want to say. If the board has any questions, I can answer them, but I just want to make those points very clear for the record. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Chet. I think as you mentioned, I think this board has a lot of confidence in the planning board and their ability to, address the issues that you're raising. I also think the secret review will be critical in this particular case. And I do think that the planning board is up to the task. So I think that, also addressing that board is probably much more important than addressing this board, because it's, obviously timely. But we definitely appreciate your thoughts, and I think we share many of your concerns. I don't know if anyone else has
Thank
anything else to say, but otherwise, thanks again, Chet, for all your thoughtful correspondence. Hopefully you'll stick around on the call. Jesse Clinton.
Brian,
How are you?
all right, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
Okay, so thanks for having me speak here, and I think I'm just gonna, if it's okay, share a few thoughts on our neighbors here, and I guess ask some advice from you all on what the best course of action would be. So here, here's my basic thought. Like when I was in high school, and I wanted to throw a keg party, and I threw a good keg party, Brian. Like I would go around to my neighbors in high school. I had the wherewithal to like go around to my neighbors and be like, listen, gonna have some people over tonight. It might get loud. Please come talk to me. I want to make sure everything goes well for you all. You know, we're all, you know, part of one neighborhood. We want to respect each other, you know? And that was in high school, you know? So I don't know. I think back to that and kind of the way this first event was handled. And it just seems like there was a complete disregard for, you know, everyone in the neighborhood as a first event, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of got presented as, which I was all for, right? You know, minority women promoting their education and you know, and well-being. I thought that was great. I mean, I have 3, what you can consider minority daughters. So, I mean, all for that, you know? So I was really disappointed in the way that kind of went down and the way, you know, especially for a first event that, you know, there wasn't even like I would actually go around even and go back to being 16 years old. I'll go around and clean up after, you know, everyone. So there's, you know, there was a mess in the streets. I mean, people were leaving glasses and cups on my, you know, on my fence, you know, like glasses on the fence, you know, like just it would have been taking 2 seconds for someone to come sweep up and down the street. I mean, my house was shaking, dude, shaking. So like
So I
literally
think
shaking.
the only silver lining I'll put on the first 2 events, because really the one event turned into 2, which I think also made it worse than it wasn't just one afternoon. Was I think now I think we're paying much more attention to this special permit request than we otherwise would have potentially, because we kind of lived through what we don't want to live through again. You know, I think even things as basic as something like no amplified music outside, we would not have thought of that if we hadn't had, you know, such a large event. I think it also allowed us to envision what a large event looks like on that particular property and how the flow doesn't work for the most part in a lot of the ways. You know, so, you know, I think that if I could have a silver lining for all of that, is we learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That we hopefully won't repeat with the special permit. So that's my positive spin.
Got it. So I mean, what are next steps? I mean, where is everyone with this?
Well, we're having a public hearing tonight, so you kind of unofficially kicked it off.
Got it.
You know, so we'll be discussing kind of, you know, this board's thoughts. We're going to hear public comment on it, and then hear from the applicant as well. So, you know, it's I think there's still a lot of work to be done on figuring out what and how, you know, and I'm thinking we started with the largest possible special event that any of us can remember. And, you know, I think we have to figure out where we're okay, you know, starting over again. And, you know, and it's definitely not going to be that big. And I think that's where we start, and see how it goes from there. But, yes, we had a lot of discussion tonight about it for sure. And I appreciate you kicking it off.
Great.
Anyone else, any public comment about something that's not on the agenda? Otherwise, I will move to the consent agenda. Anyone have any questions on the consent agenda from the board? Otherwise, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, now we'll go into the public hearing requesting a special permit for adaptive reuse of a historic building at 67 North Broadway, which is known as Villa Lawaro. So Larry, did you want to promote the applicants to the panel?
Yeah, let me do that. It might take a couple minutes. So
Sure.
hold on a second.
I think we actually received a few more pieces of correspondence today as well about this. But again, if I can boil down most of the concerns, it's traffic and noise are the two primary concerns. And I think that people are hypersensitive because there was such a large event. That was kind of the kickoff that no one was anticipating, including the village the first day. So I think that the neighbors are, probably much more focused on making sure we don't have a repeat of that, which the village board obviously shares those same concerns. But at the same time, I think we're overall supportive of the mission of the organization that wants to hold events and things like that. So, I think that, we've discussed it, somewhat internally. And I think we share a lot of concerns from a lot of the letters, which I assume that you've seen the correspondence, but loud amplified music, parking on village streets. Obviously, I don't think we have to talk about litter or anything like that. That's just kind of a given. But I think that I think the special events are definitely the piece of the special permit request that is the most problematic. And I'm not really sure how it even really fits into kind of the special permit uses that are currently allowed. We do have kind of a test case with the Octagon House that was a historic building that had an adaptive reuse. They use it mostly for tours and kind of limited special events. So I think that that's kind of our model for what probably works. They also are on a street that has almost no parking, so it's kind of similar. It's not on a main street like Broadway, but that kind of creates problems and makes it better, and both at the same time. It's a double-edged sword. So I think I'm not sure exactly the best format here. I don't know if we should kind of share our concerns first, then maybe open it up to the public and then let the applicant kind of speak. I don't know if anyone on my board, I've kind of done it from a 50,000 foot level, but I don't know if someone wants to, from my board, kind of kick off with some of our specific concerns. Otherwise I can keep going, but I've probably spoken too much already. So.
Well, I could say a couple of things, Brian, and I'd like to welcome Lilia Bundles and Richelieu Dennis and the others who have joined us here. Thank you very much. I think, as Brian was saying, the special events seem to fall into a little different category with us, and it's, it just, as it happens, that one event has happened and there were problems. So of course, it's very obvious to the neighbors and others what some of the concerns are. But I think there is, in general, this sense that the special events need to be very closely tied to the goals that are stated for the Institute and not be necessarily, I'm not going to say just, but rented separately to things that don't connect so directly. So that was one thing that I personally feel is important. There were some things about the regular programs too, the tours and how many people, there were some concerns, I think, myself and others about how many people would be on the site for those programs. What would the hours be? How often would they be? Would attendees be driving their own cars? If not, how would they be arriving? So there are some more specifics that are on my mind and others that have to do with the neighborhood as well. But I'll stop there.
And Mayor Smith and Board of Trustees, good evening. Jennifer Gray from Keenan Bean, attorney for the
Board of
applicant.
Trustees. Excuse me, can we have the Board of Trustees talk first as agreed? And then you
Sure.
can come in after the public has talked?
Absolutely. I was
Okay.
just going to offer I can address some of the
No,
questions.
we don't want
as
you to
we
address
go,
yet.
or-
We
okay.
want to be able to address our own concerns to you. You need to be in listening mode right now.
Absolutely
Okay.
understood. I just wanted to offer the.
I know, but that wasn't asked for.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so since I'm mouthing off, I'll mouth off about it. My concern beyond the basic educational kind of institute for Black women and entrepreneurial institute, I think that's a fabulous, kind of organization or program to have. I think it fits in very nicely with the historic property and its context. My concern is that a lot of these other things that have been talked about really sound more like it's trying to push the mansion into a venue type of environment. And it's very clear from the special permit code as written right now that an open-ended venue environment is not envisioned or part of the available options in terms of what kind of activity can occur. Rather, it has to, as Connie pointed out, it has to be very closely associated with the historic context or the educational context of the property. So to my mind, a lot of this that we're worried about in terms of the larger events and stuff like that really is not even appropriate for this particular discussion, because those will be one-off discussions where the applicant will have to come to the village and request special permits for such activity. But what we should be focusing on is what are the constraints directly related to the educational function.
Okay, we want to, Janice, did you have anything you wanted to add? Or Larry? Lonky?
No, I share the that has been expressed that I think we want to be very clear that the events that take place there are connected to the mission. I think the biggest red flag was, are we talking about this morphing into an event venue? However, saying that, we're also very aware that part of the purpose here is to encourage entrepreneurs, and that by definition involves a commercial function. So that there's, there may be certain purposes or events that support certain ventures that may be commercial in nature or may involve some sort of sales or performances or whatever. So we have to be very, very careful how those are characterized and how they are handled, and all of the concerns that my colleagues mentioned about parking and noise. I also want to emphasize this. While we got reasonable number of letters from concerned neighbors, and understandably so, there was no question about the mission of the Institute. People went out of their way to support that. This is just about how events that take place on site affect neighbors, and it's about noise and lights and music and traffic, and that's it. So if we can figure out reasonable parameters for that, that's what we're here to try to figure out.
Larry Lonky?
I don't really have much to add from what my colleagues have stated. I think both on a general scale about the value of the Institute, but also the fact that this permit ought to relate to the activities of the Institute. And then also getting down into more of the nitty gritty, where we're talking about traffic issues and parking issues and and noise issues. So again, I'm curious to hear what residents have to say, and I'm curious to hear what the representatives of Bill Lawaro and the Institute have to say.
Yeah, and I think there's almost, again, I think we've talked about it some, but there's almost kind of questions about the regular programming, which would be kind of the more frequent, regularly occurring, what kind of the programs are expected, how many people are going to be on site for them, the hours, how often they'll be, how attendees are expected to drive their own cars, if not how they'll be arriving, and similar to tours, which would be, I guess, more regular as well, and then, I think those I think are things that are probably manageable. We could probably come up with some, kind of along the lines of what you're looking to do. And again, similar to the Octagon House, but, I think we will have to, really focus on the special events, separately almost doing this as two separate approvals or something. Yeah, I think that's my thoughts. Right, Connie has another thought.
I remember we talked a little bit about the internal parking spots that we saw the picture of, where the spots were and how they were arranged. I think, I don't know if it was Brian or somebody might be getting back about the space for the fire vehicles. Was that adequate or not? I remember a conversation. I'm not sure if it got resolved or not, but also this idea that when parking is off-site, then the way in which the drop-off then has to be on-site. In other words, it seems like there's concern about queuing up, which creates backups again on Broadway. So there are some specifics about how to organize the on-site parking, dropping off, and avoiding kind of a backing up situation onto Broadway, because as the letters and anyone who lives here knows that as soon as congestion gets worse there on Broadway, it has a boomerang effect across a whole area, including how to get to the how long it takes to get to the train station. So there are all kinds of ways in which the drop off, parking, queuing, blocking of Broadway needs to be worked out with greater detail. That's all that I.
Okay, so I think now we'll probably, I think we should open it up to the public. Again, I think, Jennifer, I think you should have gotten all the correspondence except what came in today, which, is obviously it wasn't in time for the meeting, but we'll pass that along. So we have one hand raised from Nina Caparel Dawson, which might be John Dawson. It's you never know. It's a surprise.
Your mic is off.
Looks like you're still muted, either Nina or John.
There we go.
There you go. And it's John.
I'm sorry I got on late. I don't know if they mentioned their parking plans as they did at the last meeting, or if you were just picking it up from where you left off.
No, we have not discussed anything new, so you didn't miss anything.
Well, there is an issue about the parking the way it was mentioned last time. It was stated that Immaculate Conception was going to be used when there was an excessive number of cars, and that is not totally accurate. I am the parish council president, and I asked that question of Father Ashman, and he said it was broached to him, and he said, possibly, it depends on the timing and everything else, because Immaculate Conception uses that area very frequently. And he was told it was only going to be 1 to 2 times, and they could possibly work something out if Immaculate Conception did not need it. But the way maybe I heard it wrong at the last meeting, it was stated, no, Immaculate Conception was in on all the days that they needed more than, 20 spots at Villa Luaro?
I think it was more just kind of the churches were going to be used for overflow parking. So not just Immaculate Conception, but all three. And the big special events were proposed as 1 to 5 a year. So that does seem to jive with what Father Ashman was told. But
no, he was told 1 to 2, but also at the last meeting, they said sometimes these seminars might not be able to handle all of the parking on site. It just seems to me that I don't think we should just take that parking thing and not have a red flag there that there might not be something that is totally worked out. And I just wanted to make that point.
We agree. We agree with you. And the special events would have to have another special permit issued. So that would have to all be obviously included in that plan. But it's a good point that parking is obviously a large issue, which is related to traffic. Kathy Harsher.
Hi, how are you? I'm Kathy
Good.
Harcher. Thanks for having this meeting and hearing us all tonight. We live next door to Villa Lawaro. We're at 65 North Broadway, and we were very present the weekend of the fashion show for both days. And I guess the experience I just want to talk about is, you know, it's one thing to have had the fashion show with several hundred people and thinking it's a one-off, right? But what happened throughout the course of that is it moved then to a cocktail type party at the back. So in our experience, we experienced both a very large event and a small event. So the small event was several hundred in the cocktail party, but that also dissipated over time. And there were roughly, 50 people there for the last couple of hours. So just from an experience of being next door and being a homeowner, we bought a home in a residential area next to a residence. Never imagined something like this even being discussed. So our experience is that no events, are acceptable in a residential community like this of any size. There's just no way to manage noise. You have crowds of people talking over each other. You have shouting, music, as we experienced. Of course, that could be turned down, but it's just a disruption. I think if the board, what we would appreciate is the board looked at this from a situation of if you live next door. And, what would that look like to you? What would that be like? Because we experienced it firsthand and it was completely disruptive to our entire household for 2 days. The event itself was exciting, no doubt. But that is not a place to have it. And I think if we tailored it to a smaller size and we call these special events, there's just no way to manage noise on anything like this. I think that's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you. Ish.
Oh, hi. I don't really know how to do these Zoom meetings very well. I don't know. Can you guys see me very well?
We can't see you, but we can hear you. So that's good.
Okay. So I live across the street and it was very hard for me to get the information for this Zoom call, but I live across the street from Madame C.J. Walker's house and I grew up across from her, and I don't see many other people that are my age here. But I would like to say that I have watched that house, and I went in and spoke to the relatives that used to live there. They're really nice people, and they even invited me in before they sold it. I've watched that house sit for so long, and it's just so sad. And I don't think that we should let this opportunity for the people in our community that may feel left out kind of slip by for them, and also for us being part of this community as well. I do think that, especially the neighbors, something needs to be done so that everybody can feel okay about this, but I don't think that it shouldn't happen just because, we haven't had enough meetings about how it should proceed and the parking situation, the noise and stuff. I was here when the venue was going on, and I don't think it should be judged by the venue either that happened, because I don't think that's something that's going to be happening all the time. It's from what I looked at, on their application. It said something about like helping women, empowering women, having meetings, and like that's not to say that there's going to be just a constant party over there. So I think it needs to be thought about a lot in that context too, because it's just so sad for me watching that place just kind of not being used and utilized like it should for people who may need it in the community and even the surrounding areas. It's just such a shame that I keep watching it every day. It's just makes me really sad. And this outcome was kind of a dream that I had for that place. I really hope that it gets to happen. There are definitely people in the area, surrounding areas, and even in this area that need help, need that kind of help. And that's what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Ish. Could you just give us your full name so we could just have it?
Yeah, my name is Tara Grable.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much for your for speaking up tonight.
Yeah, thank you and all of you.
Anybody else? Doesn't look like it. So Jennifer, I don't know if you've now had the correspondence and you've gotten to hear what everyone was thinking about. So you're on.
Sure. Thank you very much. Again, for the record, Jennifer Gray, attorney with Keenan Bean, representing Villa Luaro LLC tonight, and seeking a special permit for the adaptive reuse of the estate at 67 North Broadway. We did have a little bit of a presentation prepared. I will skip some of that because I think you've covered some of what we were going to cover. I was going to go through some of the history of Villa Luaro, which I think everyone here is obviously familiar with, including members of the public. I want to mention who I have with me here tonight as well. We have Mr. Richelieu Dennis, the property owner, here with us tonight via Zoom, also his associate, William James. We also have architect Steve Tilley. And we also are joined by Madam C.J. Walker's great-great-granddaughter, Alilia Bundles, as well as Erica Seaborn from the law firm of Polsinelli PC in New York City, who also represents the owner. So we have quite a group with us tonight. I do want to mention, because I think there's, based on some of the public comments in the letters that we did receive, with respect to the special permit, I just did want to clarify for the record that a special permit isn't a variance. It's not seeking permission for something that is not allowed by the code. A special permit is a permitted use in the zoning district. I know the village board is familiar with this, but for the benefit of the public, it is a permitted use in the code subject to satisfaction of a number of criteria that are set forth in the code. So we're not seeking a variance, we're not seeking a zoning amendment, we're simply seeking a special permit. So in that regard, I know there were a lot of questions, obviously, about how the property is going to be used and the parameters for that. It will be used by the Madam C.J. Walker Institute for Women of Color Entrepreneurs. For ease of our conversation, I'll refer to it as the Institute. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So we're obviously take very seriously what goes on the property to make sure that it is consistent with the charitable purposes of the organization. So to the statements about and the concerns about the property becoming simply a special events venue for any purpose of event whatsoever, that is something that we simply would not allow because it could jeopardize our tax exemption status. It's not in line with the charitable purpose of the organization that will be utilizing the property. The organization is dedicated to, its mission is dedicated to educating, empowering, and uplifting women of color entrepreneurs. So much of the programming that's going to be offered by the Institute through the New Voices Foundation is consistent with that purpose. And that gets to the first of several components of how we envision the property being used. And that's really for an educational component by the Institute through the New Voices Foundation. So the Institute works with several nonprofit and for-profit organizations, and they're focused on providing flexible funding and learning and networking opportunities for women of color entrepreneurs. Through that, what the foundation does and the Institute does is host seminars and workshops for entrepreneurs participating in that programming. So this typically would be up to 3 days of programming. So envision a 3-day conference. Up to 50 participants is what we have provided in the statement of use submitted with our application materials to the Board of Trustees. And it's envisioned that there would be up to 15 or 16 of these events, these conferences per year. Typically, they would be a full day conference, 9 to 5, 9 to 6, potentially with a dinner or a networking reception for the participants at the site. So that's the educational component. It would involve a series of panel discussions on how to access financial capital, e-commerce strategies, mentoring sessions, development of marketing plans, business plans. And a lot of times these conferences will conclude with a pitch competition. And we talked about this in prior meetings, a pitch competition being something similar to, envision the TV show Shark Tank, where entrepreneurs pitch their ideas, their business ideas to real investors and receive feedback on their business ideas through that competition and potentially be awarded funding to go to market with that idea. So very, very uplifting and empowering types of programs. They will not always be a 3-day format program. There could be single day, single topic programmings, and a morning session, an afternoon session. But the thought is that 3 days would probably be the maximum amount of time for these conferences. The second component that we talked about is private tours. The Institute may host private tours for organizations upon request. Depending upon the frequency within which the Institute receives these requests, they would try to accommodate those requests up to 50 people. It's anticipated that those tours would occur during the daytime hours, 9:30 to 4 o'clock, except that an occasional evening tour may be offered or accommodated for requests, a tour that may be offered after working hours. And I'll mention also that the estate has to be open to the public at least 2 times per year. That's a minimum per the conservation easement that's held by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which does include certain public access requirements. Another component of the use is simply office space for the Institute. The Institute has a board of directors and private contractors that is involved with the board of directors with their programming. So they would utilize the property for general office space, office use related to its programming. The organization currently has 3 members on its board of directors. It doesn't employ any full-time staff. It typically contracts with 1 or 2 administrative professionals at various times throughout the year to manage its operations. But it's not a typical Monday through Friday operation. So you will not see all 3 members of the board of directors there on a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 basis. It's anticipated that the office space will really only be utilized about 6 or 8 days per month. But the property is visited about every other day by a caretaker for security purposes. Now, getting to what everyone wants to talk about, right? The quote unquote special events. Special events and is really encompasses a wide category of things, I'll say. We anticipate that because of the powerful history of the property, from time to time, the Institute will be approached to host special events that relate to the charitable purpose of the organization, either through the educational purposes of the Institute or the history of Madam Walker and its historic and architectural significance of the building. Some examples, just to try to put this into context, because I know the only context that we have right now is the Pyer Moss fashion show. That would be very uncharacteristic of the type of special event that the Institute would be seeking to have at the property. More characteristic would be something like a photo shoot for a Black-owned business. In fact, the owner has already received interest in just that. About a year ago, they held a small photo shoot that took place at the property for a company called the McBride Sisters. That's the only, or one of the only, I believe it is the only, Black female-owned wine company in the United States. So the estate was opened up for a short photo shoot. There was less than 50 people at the property. It probably went unnoticed because it was not impactful to the neighborhood. Another example of a quote-unquote special event, which, by the way, we're sort of categorizing as an event at the property that's not its typical programming, not its typical educational programming like the conferences and the seminars that we spoke about as part of the initial statement of use. Another example is a brunch for past participants of the New Voices program. Other examples could be things that the board has been asking about, opening up the facility for things other than the educational mission of the Institute, but things related more towards the history of the site and the history of Madam Walker. Perhaps a school field trip, offering the estate as a location for a meeting by a local historical society or programming by a local historical society. So those are things that are not part of the bread and butter, so to speak, of the Institute's programming, but offerings that the owner would like to make available to the community. So special events is sort of the category that those things would fall under. Let's see. We do anticipate that would be, in the minority. These special events would be in the minority of the things happening at the site. So we talked about at the beginning that the conferences would potentially be about 15 or 16 per year. There would be certainly less special events. We're anticipating 1 to 5 per year. There could be as few as 20 guests for these special events, as much as a few hundred, again, depending upon the type of special event, whether it's a school field trip or a small photo shoot for a Black-owned business. The numbers of guests would vary. What we did propose in our submission for the last board meeting was that for events with an expected attendance of 200 or more guests, the applicant would seek sign off from the village board so that the board can confirm that all of the appropriate protocols are in place for traffic control by off-duty police officers, that we have our off-site parking secured, and I will speak to parking in a moment. We have our off-site parking secured. There's the village is aware of any noise that is anticipated from the event, so that the village's administration and police department can appropriately prepare for the event. At the last board meeting, we were asked about historic events at the property, whether we were familiar with how many people had attended historic events from the property, as well as the maximum capacity of the building. And if I can share my screen, Larry, do I have the capability of doing that? I do have
You do,
two
yes.
photos that, let's see. We have two photos here, one from an event from 1919, which shows an event at the property. Can everybody see that photograph? I see shaking heads. Yes, great. So this is from a time when Madam C.J. Walker did reside at the property. She resided there. She started living there in 1918. And I'm told this photo is from 1919. So it's interesting. The back of the property looks very much, it looks very much the same today. I guess the outfits of the participants would be the only thing that you would know that this is from 1919 versus 2021. But I mean, you can see how many people were in attendance at this event in 1919. So this is one of the historic gatherings at the site. We actually, someone from Steve Tilley's office actually counted each of the individual folks here and came up with the number of 270. So that is one photo, and I'll just share this other one. This is another photograph. I'm not sure of the year. Steve, if you know the year of this one, let me know. But this shows from the front of the site, again, another gathering of quite a few people at the property. As far as...
I don't think we're seeing
I don't
your...
see that.
Oh, you're not
picture.
seeing that. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I will stop the share and try it again. There we go. Do you see a photo of the front of the building now? Okay.
Yes.
Great. So just another example of a larger event at the site, historically speaking. Steve Tilley's office has also started to engage in the calculations necessary to come up with we were asked what the maximum occupancy of the building is under, building and fire codes. That's an involved process, as I understand. It also involves some coordination with the building inspector and fire inspector. So, Steve, I don't know if you're able to share with us your status on those calculations to date, understanding that it is still subject to review by the building inspector and fire inspector.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, good evening, everybody. And I think I first want to say that we have been listening to everybody, all of us, and we've been taking in what everybody's been saying. And I think we're here in good faith to try to make our program work and accommodate the needs and interest and safety and well-being and good lives of all the neighbors. So the numbers that we've been developing, the big picture is we're changing the use under the building code of this building from a single family residence to another use, which was anticipated by the special permit legislation. In the same way that the Octagon House is really undergoing a change of use. The occupancies under the building code are called business, which will be applied to the spaces that would be used for offices and related institute functions, and then assembly. And those are the places where groups of people can gather. And there are different, without going into the weeds, this is something under the existing building code that gives great authority to the building inspector in determining what's safe, what kinds of conditions, what kinds of life safety measures, what kinds of security measures and egress requirements need to be met by the applicant. And so we will be working that out with Ed Marin, the building inspector. And in doing our homework to meet with Ed, we've done an analysis of the square footages of the different parts of the building that you can occupy. And the code talks about assembly uses where you're sitting at tables and chairs, or where you're sitting in loose chairs, say listening to a lecture, or where you're standing, which you can imagine even in a single family house, people throw cocktail parties and you're standing around, there's a bar and it's fairly dense. So for example, and I'm not, these have to be worked out again with other considerations like safe egress and things like that. If you look at the first floor and you look at the spaces and you assume that, say, a third of the space is occupied by furniture, at tables and chairs, you can accommodate 82 people on the spaces of the first floor, not including the kitchen or the library or spaces where you really would not be doing that. In a loose chair situation, the first floor, and again, these numbers are just flow out of square footages, making the assumptions we've made, and we'll review them with the building inspector, you would accommodate 181 people. Again, this is building code numbers, and these are not my numbers. And standing in those same spaces, which would be the main hall, the music room, the solarium, which is currently off limits because we've safeguarded it until we can restore it. The dining room, that again, under the building code of 5 net square feet per person, that would accommodate 250 people. So again, I don't want to say that these are the numbers. The numbers will be worked out in conjunction with the building inspector using the numbers that flow out of the building code, and then mitigated presumably by his interpretation and by considerations like egress and egress paths. The first floor has 3 potential exits, one out to the terrace, one out to the porte cochere, one out to the front. And so, it has reasonable access. So we'll be doing that kind of analysis for all 4 levels of the building and the potential occupancies. And then we'll have something that could be adopted as part of the special permit.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. There were 3 other topics I want to touch on quickly. One being parking, which members of the public and the board have asked questions about and we're concerned about. So our parking program involves a 3-tiered system, as we've discussed at prior meetings. And what I'll do is I'll share my screen again and show you the plans that we had previously submitted. Can you see the plan? Okay, great. So the first tier would be a self-park system, and this would be for very small conferences, seminars, or events at the property. As you can see here, so here's the building itself. Here's North Broadway, just to orient you. Fargo Lane is at the top of the screen here. Here's the driveway coming in, the horseshoe-shaped driveway with a loop here and a small driveway coming down to the carriage house. So these gray rectangles that you see, those are parking spaces. And there's up to 12 parking spaces that we've identified that would be available for just self-parking, folks driving to the site in their own personal vehicle and parking on site. This is intended to leave enough access, enough clearance to allow for emergency vehicles to get past, to get to the front of the building and to get down here, if necessary, to the side of the building. We did receive comments at the last board meeting about whether this area here would be needed for fire access on the side, on the loop coming around the north side of the building. That is something that we need to coordinate with the fire inspector about. Of course, if that area is needed for fire access, we would end up losing one or both of these spaces, which would just trigger the next tier in our parking plan a little sooner than anticipated. This right here, I'll mention, is a porte cochere. So fire trucks do not currently have access here, and nor would they in the future. This is proposed. There's no physical changes being made to the site in connection with a special permit application. So this porte cochere would remain, but fire trucks may still be able to access the building from this side here. So the next sort of tier in our parking plan, if I can, let's see, navigate here, sorry.
Other direction.
Yes, thanks, Marianne. You'd think after all these months on Zoom, I'd have this down.
Get the page numbers at the top.
Right. So here's the next tier. This would be the valet parking option. So for an event or a seminar with a few more attendees, a few more guests, the owner would utilize a valet parking service, and we'd be able to utilize this tandem parking around the loop. Of course, same as the previous plan, subject to confirmation from the fire inspector that this area would not be needed for fire access. Again, if it is, then we just go to the next tier a little bit more quickly than we would have otherwise anticipated. The next tier, and we don't have a slide for this, so I'll stop my share. The next tier is an off-site parking situation. And the ownership has had conversations with both the Irvington Presbyterian Church and the Immaculate Conception Church, both located about a quarter mile from the site, and received commitments from both to provide parking for overflow parking for events or seminars at Villa Lewaro. The parking situation at the churches has, I think we discussed this at the last meeting, that it is subject to the needs of the church. And I think we discussed the fact that at least one of the church does have a child care or nursery program. So obviously the needs of the church in providing for its own events, its own uses would come first, and any spaces that they do have remaining for overflow use could then be offered to Villa Lewaro. We're also looking to get into contact with Mercy College as well, to utilize Mercy College as an off-site parking location as well. So guests would be encouraged to utilize the off-site parking by parking at the off-site location, and then they would be shuttled to the property from that location. We do not intend to use large coach buses for the shuttling purposes. Instead, the smaller jitneys would be used. Those jitneys can very easily access the driveway. So they would pull in on one side of the horseshoe-shaped driveway, let folks off out at the front of the building, and then exit and go pick up the next round of passengers. So there would be no staging of jitneys or coach buses on North Broadway or Fargo in that situation. The one exception would be in the event that there is a large group of folks coming from the city or coming from one particular hotel, the ownership may opt to use a coach bus to provide one shuttle service via coach bus to the site. In that instance, if that option were necessary, The coach bus would not be able to maneuver through the driveway. We don't believe it. They would be able to access the driveway. In that instance, the coach bus would necessarily have to park either on North Broadway or Fargo for a limited time, just to allow passengers to disembark, or on the return trip to load into the bus and head back to their original location. In that event, we would coordinate with the village to make sure that all appropriate traffic control is in place through the use of off-duty police officers, whatever protocols the village would deem necessary to provide the traffic controls necessary to allow for that short-term parking of the bus. During the event, the bus would then be required to move to another location, would not be permitted to stay on North Broadway or Fargo for the duration of the seminar or the event. So I think that wraps up the parking points that I wanted to make. The last, sorry, there's two other points I wanted to make. One was regarding noise. I know noise has been a topic of concern for both members of the public and the board as well. I would mention that the code, the village code, in the noise ordinance does permit amplified music up till midnight, which was surprising. That's late for a village noise ordinance. We do not anticipate needing to have any sort of outdoor music up to midnight. That would be a rare occurrence if it were to occur at all. We could entertain and discuss a limitation that would limit noise to a reasonable hour, 10 o'clock, perhaps one level of noise, one noise limit during the weekdays, one on weekends, but that's something that we can discuss. We do feel that it would be unfair to have a blanket prohibition against noise or amplified noise at all times outside, because that would be treating this property differently than the other properties in the neighborhood. Folks at a single family house could have a barbecue of 30, 40 people and very easily have a radio playing up until midnight, according to the code. So we would just ask to be treated similarly to the neighboring properties in this district, and not have a blanket noise prohibition for outdoor amplified noise. And then the last point I wanted to make was regarding enforcement. This has come up in public comments that we received both at the last meeting and I think in a written public comment as well. The village code, it's absolutely within the owner's best interests to comply with any and all conditions in a special permit issued by the Board of Trustees. And the penalty for not complying is the risk of losing that special permit. So the village code in section 224-8G, as in George, is entitled revocation of special permits. And whenever a condition of a special permit is deemed to have been violated, the village has to put the owner on notice of that violation. And if the owner doesn't seek a hearing, the permit could be deemed revoked. So the Village Board of Trustees does have the authority to revoke a special permit if conditions are deemed to be violated. So I just want to mention that there is some teeth to the conditions that the Board of Trustees would put into a special permit if granted. And it's obviously within the best interests of the owner to comply with those conditions or risk losing the special permit. So with that, I believe we've hit all of the questions and concerns that were addressed. If I have missed something, please let me know. And we're happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
I had kind of two to lead off. One was, have you looked at the easement with the National Trust for Historic Preservation? I know you mentioned it has to be open 2 days a year, and any limitations that they had on that easement, which was, I don't know, from 25 years ago or so?
Yes, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, I do have a copy of it right here. There are a couple of limitations. I mean, it's a very long document, but some of the relevant restrictions are, one is on page 8 regarding public access, and the property is required to be accessible to the public on a minimum of 2 days per year. So we would make sure that this occurs, which is, part of the reason for the private tours, and also special events, seeking permission for special events so that we can make this open to members of the general public outside of the Institute's programming for its participating in the New Voices Foundation. There is another provision that does require permission from the National Trust to change the use of the property to another use other than single-family residential. That's a separate process that the owner needs to go through the National Trust. And there are standards that the owner has to meet in order for the National Trust to issue that approval. But that's something that's separate and apart from your zoning code. That's a separate process that the owner would have to go through pursuant to the conservation easement.
And I think in that regard, I can safely say that the National Trust, who we're in touch with on a regular basis, is very positive about this development with the site, and that the initiatives that they have with respect to African American sites, this is a jewel in the crown in that sense of sites that they're connected to. And so they see this change of use as beneficial to their, their initiative and their national purposes. So we will be going through the process just as we've gone through getting their approval for every building permit and every change to the property and every tree that we've removed. Before we go to the Tree Commission, we have to go to the National Trust to get their blessing. So that's our first stop in every case.
And then the other question I had was, I kind of listed it and you covered most of them regarding the regular programming, which you had talked about. The last one was, are attendees expected to drive their own cars? And if not, how will they be arriving? And same for tours, like what's expected now?
Sure. So it depends on the size of the program. Whether it's a seminar by the New Voices Foundation, or what we're terming a quote unquote special event or a tour, everything everything is going to be dictated as to the amount of parking on site. So if there is available parking on site for the number of guests that are anticipated for the program or the tour or the special event, then it's anticipated that they would arrive in their own vehicles and park on site, or use the valet service that we talked about. Anything above what's being able to be accommodated on site is when that off-site parking location would be utilized. I hope that answers your question.
I have a couple of questions. For Jennifer, first of all, this was a very comprehensive presentation and you are to be congratulated for it's clear, but it's not a whole lot different from what you presented the first time around before the concerns were raised about the parking and the numbers. And, you're just clarifying that this is going to be a 3-tiered approach. And I would like us not to get stuck in the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. you know, you use the example of that. There's the noise ordinance permits noise up until midnight, but I think clearly when in a single family neighborhood, there's an anticipation that those kind of parties in single family houses would not be occurring 12 times a year. You know, I don't think any of your neighbors would anticipate, you know, it's not your typical graduation party or birthday party. So the very use you're talking about is, and I think the board here is trying to both applaud what you're doing and appreciate what you're doing, but also recognize that you are trying to pitch it so that we will agree to what you're presenting here, but we have a bigger audience, a bigger responsibility here. And it's not just that, well, the neighbors don't want any noise. That's not what we're saying. But we need to be crystal clear that the plan, the specifics of the plan you're developing here for numbers of attendance, numbers of events, at noise levels, parking, really fits within both the mission of your organization and the character of the neighborhood. Steve, you mentioned, and I'm sure you're absolutely right, that the capacity for a cocktail party type of event in the main rooms is 250 people. And I'm immediately thinking, and how many cars are we talking here? Even something like a 9 to 6 people for a seminar, if that seminar includes dinners. So are we talking about staff coming in to prepare, to serve? Are we talking about the attendees perhaps bringing spouses or partners with them? It's more than just this many number will fit here. We need to have a sense, and you need to know from us that we're looking to be real clear about how many people for each of these events, how many times a year we're anticipating it, and what's reasonable to allow you to fulfill your excellent mission, but allow the neighbors a reasonable expectation of peace and enjoyment of their single family homes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I also think part of the issue too is that we, you know, you talk about like, you know, learning to walk or crawl before you walk and walk before you run. I think we started at like a full Olympic sprint with the first event that we had. So, you know, as I said to, you know, Jesse Clinton in the beginning, in some ways it does provide kind of the worst case scenario. But, you know, I think that, you know, it would have been a lot easier if the first couple events were, you know, 50 people and they went great and the neighbors were so excited about them, you know. So I think that's kind of also, it's like, I think in some ways it can work to our advantage in the long run because we kind of know what we don't want and we can figure that out. But it's also, I think it just makes it more difficult to kind of, you know, moving this along. So.
Brian, can I follow up on a couple of things?
Sure.
Jennifer, thanks. You know, it was really helpful when you described the small special events you were talking about, like a photo shoot or a brunch, but you didn't give any examples of what these big ones you have in mind are, and that would be really helpful to know. And then I have another question after that.
Sure. So some of the bigger ones. I mean, we would anticipate that one of the concepts that was discussed with the owners, and William and Mr. Dennis, please feel free to interject as necessary. But one of the ideas that was talked about was sort of an end of program or annual event for past participants of the New Voices program. This would be an event that could be held once a year to celebrate the folks that have gone through the program and to celebrate their successes and what they've learned through that process. So that's just one example. So it really, I think a lot of it is going to depend on the Institute being approached by people. So much of these events are not going to be spurred necessarily by the Institute itself, but more folks coming to the Institute seeking to align with the history of Madam C.J. Walker, celebrate that history through an event that celebrates the history. Mr. Dennis, I don't know if you can provide any other context, or Mr. James or Erica, as to some of the larger events that you may be contemplating, or that you may partner with other folks in the future.
For sure. I don't know. Miss Bundles, do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
I think you should go first.
Okay. Very difficult to follow you, so I'm happy to go first. Thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for making the time and for hearing us out, and to my fellow neighbors. I do want you to hear from me directly that we all hear your concerns, and we're sensitive to them. Right. This was never the idea, or the intent here was never to be disruptive. And was actually more to be collaborative, and for us to develop this together. We think that this is a very important mission. We think that Irvington is a very important place in our history, because of this home, because of Madam C.J. Walker, and what we're now endeavoring to do, I think will make it even more important around this effort. And we'll make it one that will sustain the property and sustain the history, and drive it and make it even more glorious. I think also, as Brian has said, what we've seen here is the worst case scenario, right? This was an event that was hugely, and I don't know if everybody has context behind the event. So I think it might be, if you don't mind, I'll take a few minutes to share that context. The event was the Pierre Moss fashion show. Kirby Jean Raymond is the first African-American to be invited to show at Paris Couture in the history of couture, which is a very significant thing. He chose to do it at Villa Loire, and asked us if he could do it there because of the historical significance. The fashion show itself, he created his couture, his showing around the inventions of African Americans, which many may or may not have known the roles that African Americans have played in the basic day-to-day lives of all of us, whether it's the stoplight or many of the other the components to the refrigerator, the contributions of George Washington Carver to peanut butter, all of these staples. And he created these magnificent pieces of art in homage to the history of this country and the history of African Americans in this country, and even more broadly, the experiences that we all today have because of those contributions, including the refrigerator and the air conditioner. And so it was a very historically significant outing. It was, as you guys may or may not know, was streamed around the world, received an incredible amount of press coverage, which talked about the villa and the town in a I thought a wonderful light, and was what, the beginnings of what we have envisioned. What we didn't envision was the rain. which I think created an atmosphere that exaggerated all of the issues that were had. Again, this wasn't an event that we directly put on, but it was certainly one that we supported and we loved and appreciated it being there for all those reasons that I shared earlier. And I think the rain created an atmosphere that just made it even more difficult, with all that, made parking all that much more difficult, made moving people in and out all that much more difficult, and forcing us to have it a second day, which made it even more difficult. So I think we shouldn't forget that extenuating circumstance. And then, quite frankly, we too have a lot of learnings from how this was executed. And we've taken those learnings, I think, from even the first day, learning that we didn't have enough officers to manage the traffic and to bring in more officers. We talked a lot about the parking situations. We've put a plan together around the parking situations. So I think when you ask about what these types of events can look like, we're not talking about doing these events every week, every month, maybe even not even every quarter, right? But there will be really special activities and events that will require this permit, and will require us having the ability to be free in doing these things. But when I say be free in doing these things, I mean being free to do them within the parameters of what we've presented here, understanding what the guidelines here. We've now had the practice, if you will, of the do's and the don'ts, and I think we've all learned from that. Again, and to my neighbors, the only thing that I would say is that there were quite a few of you that attended these events, and quite a few of you that I talked to while there both days, and we had a great time together. It was surprising to me that while we were there and while we were going through this, that you didn't take the time in all the conversations we had to share with me some of the concerns, so that I would have been able to react while there. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten to this place, but now we've learned those lessons. I was really excited. We even had our neighbors were even in the New York Times, right? And photos in the New York Times, and enjoying the festivities in the rain, and so I thought it was very special. And so I will say I was a bit disheartened when none of them said anything to me there, nor reached out to me after, so that I would have been able to make some of the adjustments while inside, or at least very quickly get back and apologize for the way things worked out at that one event. But I really would be, and I think that the young lady who came on earlier, Tara Grable, I can't tell you the amount of young people that were at the event that are from the community, both that came into the event or that were standing on the fence looking in, as well as not just young people, but just people from the community who expressed how grateful they were that something like this was happening at Villa Lewaro, who expressed how wonderful they felt about what was happening, about how they felt included. And so I think we understand the challenges here, and we're going to do our part to make sure we mitigate as much of the disruption as possible. But I also think that it's at the end of the day, as I believe it was Janice who said, let's, or maybe it was Marianne. I may have gotten the person wrong. But who said, let's remember the spirit, right? Not just the letter. So I encourage us all to remember the spirit, it was Janice, right? The spirit within which we're trying to do this, and what we're trying to do, and the significance of what we're trying to do, and the importance of what we're trying to do. Not just to a community that has been left out and felt left out for so long, but also to those that have been on the inside of the community, and what this means to them as well, and what it means for all of us. And so, you know, an event that looks like what we just saw, I will tell you that from an operations perspective and an execution perspective, I don't expect to see that again, right? But I will say from an importance perspective, and from a celebratory perspective, and from a historical perspective, I would love to see that again, right? Just this time with better logistics and better operations, which we now have learned. I think we've been very responsive to the town, to the community around what the concerns are. We will continue to do that. But I think I would be remiss if I also didn't say that this has truly been, for me, a welcoming community. I've felt very confident in what we're trying to do here, and I've seen that spirit come through. Let's not get, the word that was used earlier was distracted. Let's not get distracted by the extenuating circumstances and the lack of planning and proper execution operationally on the first go round to disparage or to limit the greatness that we can create here for a lot of people. So I hope that gives you an idea of what we think those types of events will look like. I don't envision, having those types of events on a regular basis. If we did that, twice a year, I think, or 3 times, I don't know if I could take it. So I don't think we all have much to worry about there. But we do want to make sure that we leave the room for this place to live the life that it deserves to live, and for this community to be able to participate in that journey. So thank you, and thank you all for making the time and for allowing me to participate. Ms. Bundles, I'll be quiet now and leave it to you.
So Rich, thank you so much. I think that, hearing you speak is just, affirmation for me of why I'm so glad that you are doing what you're doing with the Madam Walker Institute and all of the other folks here who are working together. It's nice to be with all of you this evening and to see so many familiar faces and to see others it's actually 4 or so decades that I've been visiting Irvington and Villa Lewaro. I've always felt welcomed. And it is the Historical Society, it's the Village of Irvington, both Westchester and Irvington Historical Society, the library, the schools who have really helped to preserve Madam Walker's legacy. And just, I know that when she built the house, she envisioned it as a place that would be a venue of inspiration. The pictures that Jennifer showed you, those are actually 1924. And that was Jennifer, there's no way for you to know all these details in the way that I know them. But it was the convention of the Walker agents in 1924. But Madam Walker had an opening party in August of 1918 with a couple of hundred people, and then her funeral in 1919. So there were some big events, during her lifetime. But as Mr. Dennis says, this is an opportunity to offer something to the community. It was wonderful to hear Tara Grable, as a young member of the community, talk about what she felt. But there is some greatness that we can create. And to know that we can do it in a way that makes everybody happy, to open it up, to include the community, and also to bring in some new perspectives with some of these women who will be coming and who will carry the story of Madam Walker forward and become very successful business people. So I just really want to thank you, thank the village for having been so generous of spirit in the past about Madam Walker's legacy and helping us to lift it up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's always a pleasure to have you attend Zoom meetings with us. We don't have as many in person as we'd like, of course, but this does make it easier for sure. It looks like we have a little more public comment. I'm guessing it's John Dawson again, not Nina.
Yes, it's me again. I'm so impressed with what you're trying to do with the seminars. I just was wondering if you, how far along you are with the curriculum that you're trying to develop, because there's an organization, Networking for Teaching Entrepreneurship, NFTE, that could be of great assistance to you and could further your goals into more of even an international kind of aspect. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention if you did not already know it.
Thank you. You said Networking for Teaching
Entrepreneurship, NFTE.
So,
Thank you.
so
we
Rich,
will
you may
look
want to mention some of the things that New Voices is already doing and the curriculum at Dartmouth. I mean, there are some wonderful things that are in place.
Yeah, thank you, Lilia. So we will make sure to look them up, but just to give the folks here a little glimpse, you know, just because you don't see us physically there, doesn't mean we haven't been working like crazy. You guys know where we are in terms of rehabilitating the place, if you will. But we've also now, just so you know, the Institute now has 23,000 women enrolled in it through our virtual and online programming, with curriculum in all areas from retail development and partnerships. We're going to announce a new partnership with a large retailer really soon, of where we're taking young women from HBCUs and training them to become retail, you know, managers, directors, and executives. We're announcing a partnership with a university that is a women's institution, to provide them entrepreneurial training within their classroom and help the entrepreneurs that are in that school develop. So we've been very busy. You know, curriculum is both Dartmouth and Babson, my alma mater, and you guys may know, is I think just voted the #1 school for entrepreneurship for, I think this was the 30th year in a row. And so they're developing. We're working with them in developing program. We actually have curriculum rolling out from there. I believe it's this week or next week, on some specified areas. So there's a lot of work that's happening, right, to build this and to have the reach and the development that we have set out to do. We'll definitely reach out to Networking for Teaching Entrepreneurship and anyone else that can help on this journey, because it's not going to take one place or one set of people. It's going to take a whole village and a whole global environment to help us achieve this mission. But you should know that the work is happening as we're getting the mansion ready physically. We're also doing all of the work that you would expect to see, and so that's why we're, part of the reasons we're so excited, because the engagement and the output has been tremendous. We've already given in what we called I forget what my sister calls it, but it's a fancy term for non-dilutive capital to in the amount of somewhere like $7 million to these cohorts in this community. So the work is happening, and it's happening at a very rapid pace, and it's having a tremendous amount of impact. We have women that have now come through the Institute whose businesses are now in retailers like Target and Walmart and CVS and the places that you see and that have come through this program. And I think to date, those companies in there are generating something like $13-14 million of revenue this year alone, in coming through this pipeline and this process that we're creating. So we're having real impact, and we haven't been very public with that because we want to do that in conjunction with when the Institute is ready, right? And we'll be able to share all of this work. And by the time it's ready, this work would have probably had triple the impact that it's had now in the past year and a half, almost 2 years that we've been at it. And so that's just some good catch up for you guys. A lot more to come, a lot more work to do. And the things that we're talking about here are just in more support of that, right? And will, I think, just make this even more, make this an even more worthwhile effort, right? So thanks for prompting me on that, Lily. I tend to focus on the places we have challenges as opposed to the places we're having success. So, but the success has been great, and this is going to be all of our story.
Well, if I can just add something, I have seen some of the competition for New Voices, and to see, a dozen women pitching their ideas and then getting that, that check at the end and being able to use that as seed money to expand. And I know it's one thing to do it in a conference room, and it's quite something else to do this at a place like Villa Lawara, which has a certain magic for all of you who have been inside know. And I think back to 1998 when it was a designer's show house benefiting the United Negro College Fund. And the number of, thousands of people came through the house at that point. And the number of people, when I still run into them, they will say, that was such a special moment. I could bring my grandchild. It inspired me. It inspired me to do something else. And I think when we think about, a group of 20 to 30 women coming through for a day-long conference. We've all been to those conferences where we hear great speakers and but when you're in a really special place, it just elevates it to the next level.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback on that is, what's really different about what's happening here is you get to come to a special place and feel a part of something bigger. But you get to leave with the capital and the infrastructure and the network to actually go build something, right? So it's not just, hey, come here, all of our different ideas on how you can become a better business person. We're also going to invest in your becoming a better business person, and all of that is designed to take place here. So there's a lot at stake here. There's a lot riding here.
Well, Brian, you probably want to jump in, but I do very much appreciate getting the fuller painted picture of how far you've come with the curriculum and your goals. And I think hearing that makes, at least me, and I think many people in the community, very committed to working out the incredibly hard practical details of making this vision find a happy home here in Irvington. I am confident it's doable. One piece of that practical development that we've done in other cases when changes are made in the community is the first year is a little more modest, the second year can expand out, the third year. So in some ways, the build up to what would be the vision in full force might take a few intermediate steps so that instead of 200 people, there are 150 people. I don't know, but that there's concern initially for the impact of practical kinds of things. When you keep in mind the big goal, I think people are highly motivated to get through those practical problems, but they are real. And neighbors with kids, can feel very positive about the goals, but really want their kids to get in bed and not hear any cocktail parties except maybe twice a year. So I just want to keep in mind that I think we have to work through the hard details of this. And I don't know that we're there yet, but I'm certainly committed to continuing the conversation about it. Thank you.
I think actually, Mary, I think we have one more public comment before.
Okay.
Jesse Clinton.
Actually, Marianne, I know you had a two-part, and we didn't get back to your second part. So why don't you hit yours, and then I have a couple quick thoughts.
Okay, thank you, because mine is a good segue from, Connie was a good segue to what I'm going to ask, which is a very practical question for Jennifer. You might not have the answer now, but I think this is something you should develop for the next time you come. What your plan would be. There was big concern about cars backing up on Fargo and backing up on Broadway. So what happens if you're expecting 30 people and 30 cars, and you're using the 20, you end up with 20 valet parking spaces? How do you keep people 21 to 30 from coming up to the property looking for the parking space or backing up? So you should be able to come up with some sort of a way around that, like whether you're going to give parking passes ahead of time or whatever. But something like that, if you wrote something like that in, that would be very helpful.
Yep, we will absolutely take that under consideration. I mean, off the top of my head, one of the simplest methods, maybe perhaps like you said, assign parking spaces. Right. Upon registration. Another option may be to have a staff person standing at the driveway directing traffic, so that if the parking available on site is full, the person is directed to the off-site parking location immediately to avoid.
You don't have to have an answer now. Just
off the top of my head, a couple of ideas, but we can certainly discuss that more fully and respond for the next meeting.
Thank you, Jesse.
Okay, still hear me? All right, great. So I think I just wanted to echo a couple things. Rich, did you hear in the beginning just my quick example on the keg party on my Ragers earlier?
Yeah, and my question was, geez, I wish I could throw keg parties when I was in high school.
So I can appreciate what you said about people not coming directly to you, because that's kind of the feeling I got. We didn't get a chance to be there. We left for dinner because to go out for dinner because the windows were shaking, and it wasn't like we left pissed off. We left to say, what, this is great, this is happening. So it's a little inconvenience, but it just is what it is. Let's forward the movement. But we did feel like like I said, why not somehow enroll the community. So I really appreciate what Janice was saying about the spirit of the law. I didn't as much appreciate it, all the X's and O's of Jennifer's, everyone can have music on all night, but I kind of felt like I was going to come here to hear, look, this didn't all go as planned. There were some things we need to work on, but look, this is really the agenda that we think can be something else in terms of, really promoting, women of color and this awesome historical property that we got here, So Yeah, I'm really glad to hear some of these things. I'm encouraged by them, but you know, I guess I just still have concerns, man. It's just like we went from 0 to 100, and you know, that's just the way it felt. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being here, and I also appreciate the work that the board's doing as well.
Yeah. No, I look, I get it, man. I get it. And as I said, you know, you guys have our commitment to limit those types of operational misses and challenges and all that stuff. And quite frankly, just to be conscientious neighbors, you got that commitment from us. And so we're happy to work with the board to get to where we need to get to. But this isn't, and I appreciate this conversation, right? This isn't about anything other than making sure that we can stay focused on the larger mission and deliver it in an exceptional way.
And that is I'm sorry, Miriam, were you about to say something?
Hey, no, I'm done.
Yes, that's exactly what you should be focusing on, your mission, and you have things to do and incredibly important things to do. And I am so grateful to have you here and talking about what you're doing. And this community is blessed to have you here. But to coin another trite phrase, the devil is in the details here. We want it to work smoothly for everybody. And one very simple thing, Jennifer, when you talked about the parking, if it's, you know, the spaces are full, somebody there to direct people out. Maybe, and somebody mentioned it, a better idea is to give parking passes ahead of time. If you don't have a pass, don't even bother trying to, you know, angle your way into the driveway or trying to, you know, figure out if you can squeeze one more car in. We can handle that. That's simple. These are the kind of details that I think of, you know.
Janice,
Yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but you know, as you're saying that, and I'm thinking, and I think part of it also is, you know, for a certain number of invitees, making mandatory that they take an Uber, right? So you're
There
not
you
leaving
go.
your car
That's
there.
a great idea. Or
Right.
focusing more on train station pickups. That's a great idea. So these are kind of, and see, this is our job, no matter what kind of visionaries we are here on the board. Our job basically is to make sure it works and works for everybody. We want it to work with you. I hope you've heard that loud and clear. But we also want it to work for Jesse, who's trying to get his kid to bed at some kind of reasonable time. So we can do this, but I think it requires everybody being creative and open and thinking it through and figuring it out ahead of time before the next time.
Yeah, and I think, look, I'm excited to do the work to figure out the details, right? And quite frankly, as you guys know, and I'll say it for me, like I think this surprised all of us. You know, the board wasn't the only one surprised. Neither were the neighbors the only one surprised. I think we were equally surprised, and I think what was you know, extraordinary about this was even with all that rain, when you think about, when I said earlier the historical importance and the energy and space, even with all that rain, people came and stayed. Right. And so that was another telltale sign that you know, this is a truly blessed space and opportunity. But we weren't prepared for the rain. You know, just like I think we weren't prepared for a lot of it, but now we know what it is. As Brian said, we know what's the worst that can happen. We can plan around it, right? And I think simple ideas like parking passes or Uber invites or what have you start to solve some of those issues.
Well, to quickly summarize here, I think we were super lucky, you know, 102 years ago or 103 years ago when Madam C.J. Walker decided to pick Irvington of all the places, because there was nothing here really when she did it other than some other mansions, which I guess is why she did it. But then honestly, I think this, you know, and then we were super lucky when Ambassador Doley and his wife became such great caretakers and started bringing it back to its former glory, because it, you know, was used for, you know, kind of commercial purposes before he decided to bring it back to its kind of intended uses or original use. And then I think the third big, you know, lucky break for us was that, you know, that Rich was, you know, not just a, a fan of Madam C.J. Walker or had heard the story, but to me, the whole story about how, her business lines, everything about it, this was kind of like the final piece in the crown for you. But, we now have another great caretaker who is doing things that, maybe even Madam C.J. Walker wouldn't have thought of with the property. So, I think that those are all the super great underlying, kind of driving forces that are going to get us to make this work. I think that we completely understand the concerns. I think Connie probably has some of the ideas too, where, we don't start with the next one isn't another 700 plus person event. It's a, 100 person event, and we see how great that goes. I think that there's a way we can do this, that we can have that community spirit that you're talking about, Rich. And I think that's completely sincere. And I think that it's fitting with the property and all those types of things too. So we can get to where we need to go and still help you accomplish the goals that the institute's taken on, and have Irvington be a big purpose or a big part of that success story. So, I think we're all aligned, including the neighbors. I think every neighbor, usually starts with, we really like the idea and the mission. We just don't like, loud noise and bad traffic. So I know we can accomplish those things. I think of even, on the other end of the spectrum, like when Winged Foot Golf Club hosts like the US Open or the PGA Championship, that those roads are, make Broadway look like, Southern California freeways. And they somehow get everybody to park off site, and no one even knows where Winged Foot is until they get to, the spot, and then they're picked up and they're taken to, the entrance, which isn't even necessarily the main entrance. Like, there's a lot of ways we can do the specifics. We just have to figure out what kind of governors we're going to put in to make sure that our ideas are working in the beginning, that the neighbors aren't, really disadvantaged by this great work. And I'm confident we can do that. Jennifer, the one ask I'll have for you is, some of the things that you outlined, like the regular programming times and things like that. If you could have that in your response as well, your updated letter for us, so we have some more information, and maybe even some background information on the Institute itself. So we can just kind of have it all for the record, and maybe for New Voices Foundation as well. So we can kind of put it all together and we can figure this all out. But we have enough smart people working on this that I think we can get there, including the neighbors. So I think are reasonable, and I think that they want this to work as well. So we're all pulling the same way. We just have to get there.
Absolutely. No, we're happy to put that information together and present that to you for your next meeting.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you for for everyone that attended tonight. We'll talk to all of you soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. We appreciate all the public comment. We appreciate the board's comments, and we will see you for your next meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. One programming change is we're going to actually move up the feedback on the New York State cannabis law to the next item on the agenda, because I know we have some folks that have tuned in just for that. So we'll move that up now. Obviously, the public hearing is still going to be carried over for the special permit for Villa Lawaro. But now we're feedback on the New York State cannabis law. If anybody has any feedback, it's like Felix might have some thoughts.
Hey, good evening, Brian.
Hey,
how are you?
We've missed you. How you been?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Yeah, I apologize. I know it's I broke my streak. Now I have to start a new one.
That's okay.
Hey, Brian, before I comment on the law, a quick question. Is there going to be a chance to comment on other things? I think I missed the beginning of the meeting for general public comment on things that aren't specifically in the agenda.
Yep, there isn't, like the 13th agenda item. So this is 10. Well, I guess there's skipped a few, but yes, there's another chance at the end.
Got it. Yeah, on this one, just a quick thought. My view would be, I think we should opt out at this point, and it's for one very simple reason. It's a one chance to opt out, but you can always opt back in. And at least from my research that I did around kind of whether there's correlations between things like increases in crime when you have cannabis stores and what it does to the neighborhood, it seems, at least to me, inconclusive. I know, there's some certainly authoritative looking studies out there. Not sure who those people are, what their motivations are. but I just think it's too early. This is a very new thing to have cannabis be legal. And I think, our town being small, it just seems to me we shouldn't be a guinea pig to see how that all goes. We have the luxury of waiting. And again, you can always opt back in. You just don't have the chance to opt out if you don't take it. And given, that we tend to be very thoughtful and deliberative about how we make any decisions, I just can't imagine by the end of this year, we're going to have a definitive view. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Perfect. Yeah. And, I think the other big piece is we don't even know how New York State's going to really be, monitoring these things. We don't know how much leeway we're going to have. Like, there's so many open questions. And as you say, you don't get to opt out later. You only get to opt out now. So
exactly.
There's just way too many unknowns, and including the driving under the influence. There's so many unknowns right now that it just seems, odd to me that you wouldn't opt out now while we figure these big picture items out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I read a lot about what they saw in Colorado. And again, I just think it's another one of those things. It's like diet fads. I have my expert, you have your expert, and their recommendations are polar opposites, and they both sound like they've got all the stats in their favor. Why not just let it play out in other places and see?
Absolutely. I still eat carbs, so.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Heather Bloom. Hello, Heather.
Hi, I'm Heather Bloom. I recently moved to Irvington. We moved in August of last year from Manhattan. And thank you for having me on today.
Sure.
I agree with the gentleman you just spoke. I think we have this one time to opt out. And at any point, we can always opt in the future. There's a lot of other communities that may choose to opt in. Let's see what happens in those communities. I don't think at this time Irvington should be the test case in New York. We have time. Time is on our side. There's a lot of young families moving in here, especially from during the pandemic, as we were one of those families. We've noticed even on our block, a lot of young new families. I think people like this community. It's close knit. It feels safe. And again, we only have time to test out what these cannabis stores will, how they will impact the local community in town. So my opinion would be to opt out at this point.
Great. Well, thanks, Heather, and welcome to you and your family to Irvington. We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Danielle Gamar.
Hello, yes, I'm Danielle Gamar. I'm the Student Assistance Counselor at Irvington Middle School and High School. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with an expertise in substance abuse, alcohol and drug abuse prevention and early intervention. And I believe it's really prudent at this time for us to opt out until more is known. Opting out will give us time to consider the regulations that are established by the cannabis control boards, and then we can decide on the possible impact of this dispensaries and lounges on a community. I wanted to present some research findings from Journal of Addiction in 2020. 13 to 17-year-old youth living close to dispensaries and exposed to marijuana advertising were more likely to report their intent to use marijuana. From the Journal of Addiction in 2020, young adults living within a 4-mile radius of a dispensary were more likely to use marijuana, were more likely to use heavily, and experience more problems related to their use. The Regional Science and Urban Economics 2021, home prices within a 0.36-mile area of a new dispensary fall by 3 to 4% on average relative to control areas. So that's just some research findings. And I believe it's really in our best interest to opt out until more is known. And there's always an option to opt in. Whereas if we opt in, we're already in and there's not the option to turn around.
Great. Well, thanks very much for speaking tonight.
Thank you.
Have a good night. I don't see anyone else, Larry. So why don't we move on to the public, and just so people know, this was really our second, this was our first non-summer feedback. I think it's probably been 90-10 to opt out. I think the board is pretty set on opting out ourselves. Lisa wants to say something. So what's going to happen is, we're probably, today was the second night of feedback when people were back from summer vacations. Our next meeting or the meeting after, we'll probably drop the local law to opt out, and then we'll start the process on that. So, I think, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here, but I think the village board is pretty unanimous on opting out now for a whole host of reasons. But Lisa, so you're going to tell me I'm wrong?
Of course not. For those of you that don't know, my name is Lisa Tomini. I'm the coalition coordinator for the Irvington About Safe Kids Coalition in Irvington, and have had the pleasure of working with the community over the past several years, putting the Drug-Free Communities Grant, a federal grant, to use within the Irvington Township. So I'm very pleased to have been working actively with the board, who has been very inquisitive and welcoming of the facts surrounding marijuana. And obviously, as Danielle Gamar, the student assistance counselor, said, we can't turn back the legalization, but I do think that we need to move forward very prudently. The most glaring item, obviously, is that there is very little information surrounding how the regulatory and implementation framework will come to bear on any community that chooses to allow dispensaries and lounges. So I really commend the board for listening to the community and kind of taking careful steps to protect all of our members, not just young people, but everyone in it as well. I will also just take a few minutes or a second to acknowledge a couple of the speakers before that are very concerned about our young people. We're right to be concerned. I think this is one of those scenarios where it's a bell that cannot be unrung. And as such, we really owe it to the youth of our community to do our due diligence, look at the science behind what's out there, and make the wisest choices for our young people. We need to ask ourselves if we're going to be that community. Like, why Irvington? Is there a compelling reason for us to opt in? Is this going to make our community safer, more productive, healthier? Is this the brand that we want to put out there? So there are a lot of questions surrounding this that, again, I commend the board for really considering everything that comes into play here. So thank you. And for those of you out there that are not familiar with the coalition, we definitely encourage you to join us, engage in conversation. Our website is www.iask-cab.org. And we are here supporting our young people throughout the year, not just on marijuana, but with all other issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that is it now, Larry. So we'll move on to a public hearing to consider local law amending Chapter 213 of the Village Code of Irvington, vehicles and traffic, with respect to overnight parking on Center Street. Quickly, the history on this was the police department asked us to update this and basically allow overnight parking. If it's not mentioned, it gets opted out. We had a question at the last meeting about emergency vehicle access. So we wanted to confirm that we knew the police department had asked us to change to update the law. But we also wanted to check with the fire department and the police department again, confirm with them, as well as reach out to IVAC and the DPW for any concerns they had. And if you want to maybe give us a summary of what you learned, Larry.
Yeah, it's a very brief summary. And also, I've been having some difficulty here with my internet connection. For some reason, every 5 minutes or so, it seems to freeze for me. So
perfect.
If I freeze, you'll just have to wait till I catch back up. So the police had no concerns with respect to the overnight parking. They were the ones to make the request of the board. The DPW wants to make sure that they are able to plow the streets during a snow emergency. That's not a concern that's specific to overnight parking. It really relates to how we handle snow emergency declarations. So it's really kind of two separate things. Fire department, again, didn't have concerns specific to overnight parking. They were a little concerned that it's tight up there on Center Street, but again, that's not just an overnight parking thing, that's a during the day parking thing as well. So, but nothing that would require us to change the rules there and disallow all parking on the street, because that's essentially, the only way to solve that problem. And there was no response from EMS. So I think in terms of the overnight parking aspect of this, I think we dispelled any concerns we had.
The questions from or comments from the board?
No, that was the main question. So that's good to get that information.
Agreed. Public comment. We have John Dawson, I believe.
There we go. I hate technology. Well, the only thing I have, if you have no problems with Center Street, then what about Park and Hudson? Are we going to be allowed to park overnight as well? I mean, what's the difference between, why Center Street and not Park or Hudson?
I mean, if that's a request that's being made, we can consider that separately, but I don't know the history of this. All I know is that parking has been allowed overnight on Center Street. I don't know where that came from. So we're just cleaning up the code to allow that.
And if you'd like to make a formal request, we can definitely look into it.
I mean, I have never been so overly inconvenienced on Hudson. I just call the police and tell them I have a car on the street overnight. That's not an issue. It really doesn't happen that often. We make sure we have all our cars off the street. Every house on Center has a driveway, but I mean, I would like to say if you're going to have it, whatever you do on Center, I think should happen on Park and Hudson. That's all I'd like to ask.
Okay. What do you think your neighbors think? Just out of curiosity.
To be honest, I haven't asked them yet, but if you want me to, I will. I know they were all happy when I had the petition signed to get the beautiful paving job that you guys did up here.
Yeah, if you'd like to do the informal poll of your neighbors, because we found that some people don't like having overnight parking in their neighborhood. So,
I mean, the only problem comes in is that you have a car parked overnight and then the opposite side street on the next day, and then people are parking, so you got a zigzag. That happens on all three streets.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think most streets in Irvington as well.
So I'll be happy to go around the community and ask.
Yeah, if you just want to do a quick poll, you can go next door on each side and just send us an email with the formal request, John. We'll take a look at it.
You got it.
Thanks, man.
All righty.
Any other public comments? Otherwise, I will make a motion to close the public hearing. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's get to my resolution here. Wow, so there's so many pages on this thing now. By the way, I was talking to someone in Ardsley. Their average meeting is like 35 minutes. I don't know what they're doing in Ardsley. So okay, it's a pretty long resolution here too. I got no. There's actually is there? I'll just make a motion. There's no resolution. It looks like it's just a local law.
Oh.
Make a motion to approve the local law amending Chapter 213 the Village of Irvington Code, vehicles and traffic with respect to overnight parking on Center Street. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we go to the public hearing to consider local law amending Chapter 95 of the Irvington Building Code, building construction to adopt New York Stretch Energy Code.
Okay, so I think when we last left this at the last meeting, there was just a very subtle question about language. And it related only to one specific paragraph of this law. It was paragraph C as shown in section 2 on the local law. And I can really happy to share the screen if this works, to show you literally the difference between the language, just to clean it up a little bit. Is that, either that or I can just describe it, but let me show real quick. So the original language included this and right here, and the new language took that and out, and the new language now includes a comma down here. You can see that I've highlighted there, that comma, and that makes all the difference, which I think, Marianne, you're satisfied with how that's. Well, you're muted, Marianne.
You're muted.
Yeah, actually, the main change is the comma, with the movement of the comma, because before, the way it read in the original is the only thing required by the energy code would be alterations and additions, where in fact it's everything: new construction, substantial renovations, alterations and additions, all as required by the energy code. And moving the comma fixed that.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the definition of subtle, right? In terms of changes.
Makes a difference. Good catch.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any other comments from our board, or those will open it up to the public? Otherwise, I will make a motion to close the public hearing if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I'll make a motion to amend Chapter 95 of the Irvington Code, building construction, to adopt the New York Stretch Energy Code. If I can have a second, I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Larry, shall we declare a public emergency?
No, we still have the parks rules.
Oh, you're right. I skipped that one. So let me just quickly tell people what these parks rules are, so we don't get confused. These are not changes and things you'd like to see in the parks in the future, i.e. dogs. This is adopting what we have already said we wanted to adopt. We're just codifying them now. The reason we didn't vote on it last time is because there's a few issues that we still have questions on, which we've now clarified. So with that introduction, Larry?
Yeah, so Marianne, do you want to run through the changes, or do you want me to?
Okay. Okay, there's a slight language change in 3. It now reads, no pets are allowed within park areas other than service dogs, except that pets on a leash shall be permitted at Halsey Pond Park and Irvington Woods Park. Chet Kerr had mentioned, thought the language before was a little confusing. This, I'm not sure it was confusing, but this certainly makes it clearer. Okay, then the next change is on the next page, number 12. We added including electric bicycles, no motorized vehicles of any type, including electric bicycles. The board wanted that change, so that was added. And then the other change, Larry's the last page. On the park hours, there were different dates, from March to November, for Matheson Park and Scenic Hudson Park, and there were different times. And Larry talked to George Chino and decided they'd make them uniform. And so they would all be from March through November and December through February, and everything would be 7 a.m. to, well, 10 p.m. in the warm months, and then 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for both parks. So those are the changes.
Any questions from the board? Otherwise, we will open it up to the public. I will make a motion to close the public hearing if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I will now make a motion to approve a local law amending chapter 153 Parks and Land with respect to park rules and regulations. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So my only postscript on that will be that those of you that are wondering what's happening with potential for adding dogs to Matheson Park, RPAC is working on that, and they will be coming back, I believe in the spring, with some new recommendations and updates with the feedback they've gotten from Matheson Park and other places, and we'll hear from them then. Now we can declare a public emergency in connection with the remnants of Hurricane Ida, Larry.
Yeah, so, certainly the emergency has passed, but we want to make sure we did have to take some actions in the days after the emergency that involved retaining contractors. So we were, in some cases, we're not able to publicly bid those contracts or even seek competing proposals in some cases. They truly were emergencies. We want to make sure, and I've reported a detail of such things to the board. And so we really want to make sure that those payments are able to be considered by FEMA for reimbursement. So we want to make sure that they fall within kind of an approved framework of how we did our purchasing.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and read this. Whereas Tropical Storm Ida posed a serious potential threat to the residents and property of the village of Irvington, and whereas Tropical Storm Ida caused extensive damage to public utilities, public buildings, public communication systems, public streets and roads, public drainage systems, commercial and residential buildings and areas, and whereas the Board of Trustees finds that the state of the village is a public emergency, and whereas the Board of Trustees desires to retain contractors to complete the project in order to resolve the public emergency, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees declares a public emergency with respect to the state of the village, and it be further resolved that because of the public emergency, immediate action is required for the completion of the projects, cannot await competitive bidding. Be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees is authorized to retain contractors to complete these projects, and be it further resolved, the Board of Trustees is authorized, empowered, and directed to take any and all actions to execute and deliver any and all the instruments in order to effective foregoing resolutions. And be it further resolved that the village administrator is authorized, empowered, and directed to take any and all actions to execute and deliver any and all instruments in order to effect the foregoing resolution. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Some people are wondering what's going on now. Kind of the public emergency set part is over. The critical infrastructure has been repaired. Larry also had several members of DPW and the village engineers out documenting all the other damage, which is fairly extensive. It's probably dollar-wise as or more extensive and expensive than the critical stuff and the time-sensitive items that we had to fix, like Dow's Lane. But the good thing is that we can take it down. We can prioritize them as well as bid them out and get contractors, potentially multiple bids on some of these projects, especially the larger ones that will take a bit of time. So there you still are. If you still see something in your neighborhood that doesn't look like it did before the storm, you're probably right. But give us time. We do have a fairly extensive list of things to get through, and we're working through them diligently. Next up, we have reports of boards, standing up committees and officers, trustee liaison reports. Mark.
Caught me. No, I don't have anything else to report except to remind people again about the home energy saving event that's coming up. And I'm trying to find it. I don't have the sheet of paper in front of me now, so I can't read all the details, but I think it was posted, Larry, is that correct?
Yeah, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Warner Library and via Zoom, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And that's it for me tonight.
Larry?
Just a couple. One, fall registration is open for all rec programs. Remember, you have to register online. And another important note is that the splash pad, which has been a great success, but also a little bit of a problem in terms of installation and some areas of wear, are going to be, the splash pad will be closed as of Monday, 9/27, and is going to be replaced. That's it.
Great. Janice? Oh, no, Janice is next, right? And then Connie? I guess it doesn't matter.
I don't think it matters. Connie, you want to go first? Connie usually goes.
Connie usually goes first, right? Yeah.
Okay, because we're not sitting there all
Yeah.
lined up. I know, our boxes are all confused. Well, I just had one a point of information for people, and that is on our village website, you can actually follow some ways of searching for the Irvington Historical Society's new website. I would tell you exactly how to do it, but I'd be very interested in people's feedback if they have trouble finding it. But I was brought to my attention that there is some very important, extensive new information that has been put on that new website. One of great interest to a lot of people is the whole background of the Odell Tavern, which is by far the oldest building in the village with an incredible history. And there's also a beautiful timeline redone about the history of the village. So I'm going to see if I get any feedback from anybody. Maybe Larry will get it. Can you find the Irvington Historical Society's web link on the village website? And if you can't, then we'll see if we need to reshuffle it. But I found it, and it's really, really good information. And I applaud the people at the Irvington Historical Society who have done an incredible amount of work on that project, as well as others. So please go and look at it. Thanks.
And Janice.
Thank you. For the library, main thing, everyone, this week is the annual Foyle book sale. Fiction, nonfiction, children's books, cookbooks, and more. This Thursday, 11 to 7, Friday, 11 to 4, Saturday, 10 to 2. That will be in the program room, and masks are required for everyone over 2. There are many other programs going on. Please check the library website. School, as you know, is open. Dow's Lane is open. That required a little bit of nipping and tucking to get people up and down off Station Road the first couple of days, but it has worked out well and school is open. And from the fire chief, we work seamlessly with IPD during the storm. Several swift water rescues occurred within the village, and understandably extremely proud of the work of all of the members of the department who were also deployed in Mamaroneck to assist in swift water rescue. And thanks to all of the residents for their patience as we prioritize to respond to all emergencies in a safe manner. We don't usually think about swift water rescues, but we have a particular expertise in that.
Yeah. It also reminded me, Janice, I wanted to thank firefighter Kevin Gallagher for his 9/11 speech. Obviously, this year was the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and Kevin was our featured speaker, and I think he's now got himself a gig every year going forward as the featured speaker every year. Kevin not only is a volunteer fireman here in Irvington, he was NYPD and U.S. Coast Guard as well. So we had a wealth of experience, not just that day, but in the months after as well. So it was great to hear it from him directly on 9/11. So thank you, Kevin, for that. Village Administrator's Report.
So I also would like to thank the members of our village departments in their response to the storm for Hurricane Ida, Tropical Storm Ida. You know, from DPW to Parks and Rec to fire, police, obviously, our building department, just spending an enormous amount of time, not just emergency responding, but then in the aftermath and dealing with it all. So a lot of work to do still, but thank you to everyone. On that note, just a quick observation that you all know the site of the planned South Buckout Street Memorial to enslaved Africans. That site was pretty heavily damaged as a result of the storm. So we are taking it one step at a time. The first step is to evaluate what's there and how to fix it, and then ultimately what's left of the area to see what remains. And then, so we'll be putting that project on hold until we see what we actually have to work with after this is all done. And we've informed the committee of that, and we've informed the prospective designer of that. So it's unfortunate, but I guess it's fortunate that nothing was built yet. So that's it.
Great. Village Clerk Treasurer's report.
Some of our damage is covered by insurance. Not all of it, but some of it is. And I've been working with the insurance adjusters and our department heads in seeing how much will be reimbursed. We're hopeful that other items will be reimbursed by FEMA, but the first go-to is our insurance carriers. So we fortunately had flood insurance on the DPW site that was heavily damaged by the flood, and they've already sent us proposals back for some settlements, which we're reviewing now. That's it.
Great. Village Attorney's report.
No, I don't have one.
Public comment. Felix.
Hey, thanks a lot. I know it's getting late. I'll be quick. This wasn't on the agenda, and I apologize if I'm getting ahead of things here, but I wanted to comment on Halloween. I don't know what the village's plans are. I know I've seen other villages, Terrytown, cancel their festivities this year. I would humbly suggest that's a mistake and that we should not follow suit. I think, I'm not trying to make this a political thing. I just think there has to be a balance between kind of taking precautions that are intelligent and letting people go back to living their lives. And if you think about, Halloween with people outdoors, and not to be flip, but wearing masks probably, or at least most of the ones that we're supposedly trying to protect from each other. It seems like if people can go to camp, people can go to school, and we can do those things intelligently and smartly, we shouldn't have to cancel Halloween either. Again, I think that's where we tend too far to the extreme of risk avoidance at all costs. So I would just urge the village to not take that action. And I don't know if there's going to be any formal hearings about that, or if you guys are taking people's temperature, and I'm just too far, too early along in suggesting that. But I wanted to throw it out there, just seeing that other villages are being already preemptively making changes. I wanted to throw that out there now.
Thanks. Yeah, we haven't actually. You want to say something, Larry, first?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak directly to that point. So I've had direct conversations with the Recreation Department. We have no plans to cancel any events. We're still running our normal slate of events. Some of them are a little more challenging than others, but we are taking, what we think are prudent measures to make sure that they're safe, but we still think we can run them. So that's where we are now. I think we're aligned with.
That's great. Well, that's great to hear. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously a highly vaccinated community, and I think there's ample data now about the spread of COVID and the lack of spread outdoors. And anyway, that's all. That's great to hear.
Yeah, and I was actually planning on reaching out to the Recreation Department to see what they're doing, because I think there's a difference between municipal events and then kind of Halloween as a trick-or-treating, and for us a musical event in Irvington. And I kind of agree with you. If I can go to Yankee Stadium and for a soccer game or a baseball game, that's 40,000 people. I feel like we should be able to trick-or-treat outside. So I think the only thing, a couple of people have actually asked me already. And my only caveat is if New York State obviously does something that, preempts us, so we can't control it. But as of right now, assuming nothing changes, of course, we're trying to have, kind of as normal a Halloween as possible.
Yep. No, that's great. No, of course, understood. And I doesn't seem to me, I think if you look at what's happening at the state level, it's not that. So I think it's being smart about, requiring vaccination to go indoors and all kinds of other things that make obvious sense. But yeah, I'd hate to see us kind of go too far the other direction. I think we've all had enough. We've had fatigue of that type of sort of our knee-jerk reaction when we had less information to go on, and now we have a lot more.
Agreed. Thank you. And I'm assuming it's still John.
Yes, it's me again. I appreciate hearing that last comment. That was great. But going back to the one before that about the damage from the storm, I was wondering if there was any further damage to the clock tower with the hole up there, if we had any rain go in, creating any more damage than already exists. And also, when are we going to get that fixed?
We're actively working on those plans right now. So yeah, there was no additional damage, but it certainly needs to be addressed, and we are.
Thank you.
That looks like it for public comment. Action items? I didn't have anything.
No.
Okay.
Just asking for an executive session.
Yep. I'm going to make a motion to adjourn to executive session, discuss personnel. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. That's three anyway.
We have a link to this separately somewhere.
Yes.
Okay, I'll look for it.
Okay, bye, everyone.
Take care.